Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. Today we're going to review the book Cujo by Stephen King. To give you a little background of what Stephen King was like at this time, this book was written in 1981. I'm going to refer to another book that I have called The Essential Stephen King by Stephen Spignesi, and going to the part where Stephen discusses Stephen Spignetsky, discusses Cujo. I'm going to read you an excerpt from this that's commented by Stephen King. So, first of all, I have to turn to it. Excuse me. Okay. In Stephen King's On Writing, his 2000 autobiography, cum writing manual, he admits, "At the end of my adventures, I was drinking a case of 16-ounce tall boys a night, and there's one novel, Cujo, that I barely remember writing at all. I don't say that with pride or shame, only with a vague sense of sorrow and loss. I like that book. I wish I could remember enjoying the good parts as I put them down on the page." So, at that time, in around 1981, like Stephen King admitted, he was an alcoholic. And he doesn't remember writing Cujo, which I thought was just very interesting when I had first read that. I think, in my opinion, that's referenced or an example of what this book is like. This book is very bleak, where there is horror, but it's just there's just a sad thing about this book. And it's funny because I would think that in almost every Stephen King book that I would read, I would find at least something that as I'm reading, I just start laughing. And again, it could be a sentence, it could be like a scene that I picture in my head or something like that. But it's just, he could write the scariest stuff and I could just find myself laughing at it. And other people may feel the same way, and other people may feel, what the heck are you talking about? So anyway, Cujo is about a family of the Trentons. There's Victor Trenton, who's a husband, Donna Trenton, and then Tad Trenton. And Donna and Vic are about 30, let's say, and Tad is 4. And Vic owns an ad agency called AdWorks, and through the book, his biggest client, which is a cereal company, is going through a big problem because there's been kids who are getting sick off one of the cereals. And so throughout the book, he has to figure out and try to rescue this cereal company because, again, this is his biggest advertising thing that's running his company. So while he is doing that, his wife, Donna, is having an affair with a furniture stripper and polisher named Steve Kemp. And you don't know, like, they don't have the affair in the book. With kind of the start of the book, the affair ends, but there is mention of it. And in the midst of that is their 4-year-old son, Tad, who, like most kind of little kids, like 4 or 5 years old, is starting to be afraid of monsters in his closet. And so afraid where that Vic, being a good parent, makes a little thing, like a 3x5 card that he reads to Tad every night. Basically, it's like, monsters, stay out of this room. You have no business here. And basically says that type of thing over and over in kind of a nice poetic form. But, in most kids' sense that are afraid of monsters in their closet, in this book, the monster is quote-unquote real. And it's the ghost of a man named Frank Dodd, who, if you remember my review of The Dead Zone, murdered young women and girls. And he eventually killed himself, and his ghost now essentially is in Tad's closet. And the Trentons live in the same city that Frank Dodd lived in, which was Castle Rock. So, that's kind of a bit about the Trentons. And one thing that happens is that Donna has a Pinto that is getting, that's kind of getting worked up, and that it's not working so well. So before kind of the book started, or there was a flashback to about a year before the book started, to when Vic's car was not working, and they took it to a local guy named Joe Camber, and who worked out of his own home garage. And they were like, he was a really good guy. He, worked, he didn't charge very much money, and he did a good job. Well, the family had gone with Vic to just Joe Camber's house, and Joe Camber has a wife named Charity Camber and a son named Brett, and they own a dog, a Saint Bernard named Cujo. And when they were there for Vic's car, Cujo was a very friendly dog. Donna was very scared of it because, again, it was a Saint Bernard, so it was a huge dog. And their son, Tad, who was 3 at the time, loved the dog. And she was like, this dog could, lick him and eat him basically in one gulp. So, again, that was a little flashback in the book, but they talk a little bit about the Camber family. This is also a family that's gone through some really tough times. It's just kind of a dysfunctional family where Charity and Joe are they're married, but they don't have a really good, sturdy relationship. And Charity ends up winning the lottery, basically like a state lottery. She only wins basically $5,000, and she wants to take her son Brett to go visit her sister Holly in Connecticut. Holly lives a much different life than Charity does, where Holly's husband is a lawyer. They're kind of on the upper class, and Charity and Joe are kind of lower to middle class, and she wants to show Brett how another half lives. And she kind of gets her way because she's afraid to ask Joe if they can leave, but she kind of buys him a present and says, I gave you this, now you let us go to visit my sister in Connecticut. So he does, and they go. And while they leave, or before they leave, Cujo kind of takes on a human personality type thing, or at least in this book, where Stephen King puts in his Cujo's thoughts and his mannerisms and his actions. And Cujo finds a rabbit, and he's, being a dog, he's like, I'm gonna chase this rabbit. So he chases the rabbit, and the rabbit goes down a hole, and so Cujo sticks his nose in this hole and starts to bark, and trying to scare the rabbit. Well, this barking alerts and awakens bats who are in the hole, and one of the bats bites Cujo on the nose. And it just so happens that this bat that bit Cujo has rabies, and so now Cujo has rabies. And so, and he lives a couple of days by just okay, there's a pain in my head, and he doesn't understand why there's a pain, and now things that were really enjoyable for him, like sounds and the sun, are really painful. And the day that Charity and Brett leave to go to Connecticut, Brett goes and feeds him and notices that Cujo is different. That Cujo doesn't attack Brett necessarily. It's just he's not a happy dog. He's not, he doesn't bark. He more just growls. And he mentions it to Charity, and Charity's just okay, your dad will figure it out. We gotta go. So then Charity and Brett are gone in Connecticut, and Joe goes and does his work and notices that Cujo is there and that Cujo is different. And Cujo ends up going to a neighbor of theirs, I believe his name is Gary, and he ends up killing Gary because of his rabies. In Cujo's mind, like I said, Stephen King puts kind of Cujo as a character with his own thoughts. Cujo imagines that people around him have caused him to be in pain. So he goes to Gary saying, Gary, the man is what he refers to him. The man is in charge of me causing pain. I'm going to cause pain to this man. So he kills Gary, and Joe ends up, what happens is Joe goes to Gary's house to talk to him and notices that Gary is dead and realizes that Cujo was the one that killed him. So, and then that's where Cujo kills Joe. So now Cujo has killed 2 people. At the same time as Vic is trying again to save his Sharp company and his basically ad agency in general, and so he goes away to Boston to save the Sharp cereal company. And while Vic is away, Donna's Pinto acts up, and Donna is saying, okay, I need to go to Joe Camber's because, they did such a good job. I need to go to Joe Camber's and have him fix my car. Of course, unknowing of what just happened with Gary and Joe. So Donna and Tad go to Joe's garage, and they're in the driveway basically, and their car's off, and Donna sees Cujo, who has come back to his home place, and she notices that he's basically rabid, because his foam is coming out, and he's very mean looking, and so she tries to get away, but her car won't start, and so there begins. This is basically like a 300-page book, like 320 basically, and when Donna's and Tad are in the car, that's about page 150. So the rest of half of the book is Donna and Tad in a car, and what it is that they can't get out because if they get out, Cujo will get them, and so they're stuck, and they get to Joe's house on Monday at basically 4:00, and they spend Monday night all of Tuesday and Wednesday in this car. Wednesday till basically about noon. And that's where I'm going to stop. It does end, but I want you to read this book. Again, it is very bleak, so there's just kind of an overall sadness in this book. I must say that if you've seen the movie but not read the book, please read the book. If you watched the movie and enjoyed it and have not read it, please read it because there are differences. Anyway, that's it. The next book that I'm going to read is called Creepshow, also by Stephen King. So that's it, and I bid you all farewell and happy reading.